The truck smells like diesel and old carpet, and the seller, a heavy-set man named Gary who's run this route for 11 years, hands you the keys like he's relieved more than anything else. Two trucks, a small warehouse space you're subletting, a client list mostly built from word of mouth, and one halfway decent website. The seller's discretionary earnings on the books last year, $95,000. You've had it verified twice because $95,000 sounds like a number a seller invents, not one that survives an accountant's actual look. It survives. You put down $17,100, finance the rest through an SBA loan at a rate your lending friend calls unremarkable in the good way, and by Thursday, the trucks are legally yours. Nobody at your old office throws you a going away party for becoming a junk removal operator. Your mother asks, gently, if this is a step backward. You don't have a clean answer for her yet. You're not sure it isn't. The first 6 months teach you things no listing ever mentions. You learn which streets in your service area have parking restrictions that'll cost you a ticket if you're not careful. You learn that a couch takes exactly 11 minutes longer to remove than customers estimate when they call. You learn the specific, unglamorous math of route density. How much more profitable a day is when three jobs cluster within 2 miles of each other versus scattered across the county, burning fuel and hours between stops that individually look fine on paper. You start turning down jobs that don't fit your existing routes even when the money's decent because you've done the math enough times now to know a scattered day quietly loses money a clustered day would have made. This feels wrong the first few times, saying no to paying work. It stops feeling wrong once you see it on the monthly numbers. A truck breaks down in month 4, transmission trouble, and the repair estimate comes back at $3,200. Money you genuinely don't have sitting comfortably available. You take on a Saturday of extra jobs yourself, driving the surviving truck solo, exhausted in a way that has nothing romantic about it, just to cover the gap without touching the small buffer you'd built. You get the truck back a week later. You don't buy anything for yourself that month that isn't strictly necessary, and you don't tell anyone how close that week actually felt. At 29, you buy a third truck and hire your first full-time employee who isn't you. His name is Marcus, and the first week is genuinely uncomfortable. Watching someone else load a truck the way you'd load it, correcting small things, realizing that training someone means writing down instincts you never had to articulate before. You spend 2 weekends building an actual training document, embarrassed at how much of the business existed only in your head until you were forced to get it out. Marcus almost quits 3 weeks in, tells you honestly he's not sure this is for him. The early mornings, the physical grind of it. You spend an evening talking with him instead of immediately replacing him. And it turns out what actually bothers him isn't the work. It's not understanding how any of it connects to something bigger, not knowing if there's a real path here or just a job. You start explaining the business to him the way you'd explain it to a partner, not just an employee. He stays. Revenue crosses $310,000 that year. Your own take home, after everything, sits around $118,000, more than you made at the desk job you left, though you don't say that number out loud to anyone who knew you before. At 30, everything you've built almost comes apart in the span of about 11 weeks. Your largest residential contractor referral source, a property renovation company that's been sending you steady work for 2 years, gets bought out, and the new owners bring in their own hauling vendor overnight. No warning, no conversation. That referral pipeline accounted for nearly a quarter of your monthly revenue. It's gone in a single email. 3 weeks later, one of your 3 trucks fails a routine inspection, needs work you can't postpone, another few $1,000s you don't have sitting comfortably available this time. Not after the transmission repair the year before ate through most of your buffer. You're down to 2 working trucks and a revenue hole you didn't see coming, And for the first time since you signed the purchase papers, you seriously consider whether this whole thing was a mistake. You sit at your kitchen table on a Tuesday night doing math that keeps landing somewhere uncomfortable, no matter how you rearrange it. Payroll for Marcus and your other driver. The loan payment that doesn't care what kind of month you're having. Insurance, fuel, the truck repair you still owe on. You have, by your own honest count, about 6 weeks of runway if nothing else goes wrong and nothing new comes in. You do not sleep well that week. You do the math again the next night anyway, hoping it lands somewhere different. It doesn't. You don't tell Marcus how close it actually is. You don't tell your mother, who already half expected this outcome. You tell your accountant because you have to, and he doesn't sugarcoat it. He tells you flatly that you have maybe two moves available: cut a driver and shrink back down to something you can personally sustain, or go find new revenue faster than the runway runs out. Neither option feels good. You pick the second one, mostly because the first one feels like proof that your mother was right. You call an old friend from your desk job years that same week, not really to ask for advice, just to talk to someone who isn't inside the business with you. He asks how it's going, the normal way people ask, and you almost lie, almost say fine, the way you've been saying fine to everyone for 11 weeks. Instead, you tell him the truth, the actual number of weeks of runway, the trucks, the lost contract. He doesn't have a solution. He just listens and says at the end that he didn't know it was this close, and you tell him neither did you, really, until you started doing the math out loud instead of just in your head. Something about saying it to someone outside the business loosens a knot in your chest that's been there for weeks. It doesn't fix anything, it just makes the weight slightly more carryable. You spend the next month doing something you haven't done since the very first weeks of owning the business, knocking on doors yourself. Property managers, small contractors, estate sale companies, anyone who might need recurring hauling work. Most of it goes nowhere. You get turned down more times in that month than in the 2 years before it combined. And there's a specific, humbling quality to being a business owner cold calling for work you'd have assumed. A year earlier, you'd already graduated past needing to do. In week 3, a property management company you'd all but written off calls back. Not the one that dropped you, a different one, smaller, but willing to try a trial month of monthly cleanouts across 4 buildings. It's not enough on its own, but it's something, and it arrives at almost exactly the moment your 6-week runway estimate was about to run out. You take it. You work the trial month harder than you've worked anything in the business's life, personally checking every job before the trial period ends, because you cannot afford for it to go sideways. It doesn't go sideways. They sign a full contract. It's not the quarter of your revenue you lost. It's about 60% of that hole, filled, with the rest covered by squeezing costs harder than you'd have thought sustainable a year earlier. You come out the other side of those 11 weeks, thinner margined, more tired, and, for the first time, genuinely proud of something that wasn't a clean win. You didn't out strategize the setback. You just refused to let it be the end of the story and kept showing up to unglamorous doors until one of them opened. At 31, you land another real commercial contract. This one different from the trial month scramble, a property management company that needs monthly cleanouts across 6 buildings, recurring, invoiced, none of the day-to-day uncertainty of one-off residential calls. It's not glamorous work. It's also the single best thing that's happened to the business's actual value, though you don't fully understand why yet. You take on a second commercial account that year, then a third. Recurring commercial work climbs to almost 40% of total revenue. You don't know this is the exact metric a future buyer will care about most. You just know these accounts are less stressful than chasing residential leads every single week. And after the 11 weeks that nearly broke you, less stress has become its own kind of currency. At 34, an acquaintance from an operators forum online Someone who's actually sold a waste hauling business offers to walk you through what yours might be worth if you ever wanted out. More curiosity than intent. You agree. He asks a lot of questions before he'll even ballpark a number. How many of your commercial contracts have auto renewal clauses? How much of the day to day still runs through you personally? Whether Marcus or anyone else could run a full week without you making a single call. You realize, answering his questions, that the honest answer to that last one is no. Nothing catastrophic happens if you're gone for a day. But a full week, unsupervised, handling a customer dispute or a truck breakdown or a new client's first booking, that still needs you specifically in a way you hadn't examined closely before this conversation. He gives you a number based on that. $600,000 at roughly 2.5 times your current SDE. You'd privately guessed higher, closer to what the industry benchmarks you'd read implied you should be worth. He explains, not unkindly, that buyers discount businesses that can't survive without their owner, sometimes by a full point or more on the multiple. The gap between what you're worth today and what you could be worth, he says, isn't really about revenue. It's about whether the business needs you or just currently has you. You spend the next 18 months doing something that feels, at times, like actively working against your own instincts, deliberately removing yourself from decisions you're good at making. You promote Marcus to operations lead, give him real authority over scheduling and hiring, not just execution. You document the exact scripts you use for handling customer complaints, the exact criteria you use for pricing unusual jobs, all the tacit knowledge that used to just live in your judgment. It's uncomfortable in a specific way that buying the business at 27 wasn't, and different again from the 11 weeks that nearly broke you at 30. That was survival. This is a slower, quieter discomfort. Watching someone else make calls you'd have made differently, and forcing yourself not to override them unless something's actually going wrong. Because the whole point is proving the business runs without your hand on every decision. There's a specific afternoon, about 8 months into this, when Marcus prices a large commercial cleanout differently than you would have, lower than you'd have quoted, and you watch the email go out and say nothing, arms crossed at your own desk, resisting an urge you didn't fully know you had until that moment. The client accepts immediately. It turns into a recurring account within 2 months. You never mention that you would have priced it higher and probably lost the job entirely. You just quietly update your own instincts based on what actually happened instead of what you assumed would happen. At 36, you take an actual week off, the first in 9 years that isn't a sick day or a holiday you still checked your phone through. You don't tell Marcus you're testing anything, you just go, and you don't call in. Two customer issues come up. Marcus handles both without you, one of them better than you probably would have, since he catches a scheduling conflict you'd have likely missed in the moment. You come back to find the business exactly where you left it, functioning, unremarkable, completely fine. This unremarkable fine is, quietly, the most valuable thing that's happened to the company since the 11 weeks that almost ended it. You think briefly about that Tuesday night at the kitchen table doing math that kept landing somewhere uncomfortable, and how far away that version of the business feels now, even though it's only been 6 years. At 38, you get a real offer, unsolicited, from a regional consolidator actively rolling up smaller operators in your market. Their opening number is $1,180,000. You run the math against where you were 4 years earlier and understand, in a way that finally feels concrete instead of theoretical, exactly what that 18 months of uncomfortable delegation actually bought you. You don't take the offer, not yet. You're not sure you're ready to stop doing this, and the number, real as it is, isn't the only thing you're weighing. But you negotiate anyway, mostly out of curiosity about your own ceiling, and land somewhere past $1.3 million before deciding to table it. At least for now. At least until you know what you'd actually do with yourself the Monday after. At 41, you finally do sell to a different buyer, a smaller family run consolidator who wants exactly what you've spent years building without initially meaning to build it. A business with real recurring commercial revenue, documented systems, and a management layer that doesn't collapse the moment the founder isn't answering his phone. The number lands just north of $1.4 million. You think about Gary, the seller who handed you 2 trucks and a diesel smelling cab 14 years ago, relieved to be done with something you were relieved to be starting. You wonder if he ever thought about what his own business could have been worth with a different 18 months somewhere in the middle of his run. You also think, more than you expected to, about that Tuesday night doing math that wouldn't land anywhere good, the 6 weeks of runway, the doors you knocked on that mostly said no. That month is the part of the story you'd have cut if you were telling it to impress someone. It's also the part you're proudest of, now that enough time has passed to see it clearly. You drive past the old warehouse a few weeks after closing, the one you sublet back when 2 trucks felt like an enormous bet. It's still there, still humming, still smelling faintly of diesel and old carpet under different ownership now. You don't feel triumphant, exactly. You feel like someone who almost went broke once, quietly, without anyone outside your accountant's office ever knowing it, and figured out a way through anyway, and got paid 14 years later for exactly that.